Right, welcome to the second episode of Discussions. Today we will be talking about the Gfinity Elite Series, so what we know about it so far, / our current thoughts. Obviously, I am joined by the one, the legend that is Michael Moriarty, aka Duck. I think we've been wanting to kind of do a video on this one for a while now, I guess. Initially, we kind of just thought we'd try and wait until more information's kind of come out regarding the whole thing.
We thought we'd wait until they actually tell us things.
Yeah,
but they haven't told us anything yet, so we're going to do it anyway.
That is pretty much the summary of it, dude.
Accurate.
But so what we're going to do is we're just going to go from like start to finish in terms of the public announcements that Gfinity themselves have done, and then we're just going to kind of take segments out of it, I guess, and kind of discuss what our thoughts are on the whole thing. So we'll go from the start. So it was originally announced on November the 17th, 2016. And essentially what it was the Gfinity Elite Series will for the first time offer the UK esports community a professional league to get behind and participate in from the grassroots all the way to the pro level. The league promises to offer exciting new opportunities to watch or play in a fiercely competitive environment. Now, obviously that the original announcement that they had, obviously there's a bit more in terms of saying that they were going to launch in April 2017. Good job on that one.
Happen.
And obviously it does state more in terms of like the top competitors will qualify for the Gfinity Elite Draft from the Challenger Series. Obviously it doesn't go into too much detail, and at that point of the original announcement they didn't have the 3 games decided, and all 3 games were kind of just released one by one as time went on between that original announcement and now. So on the first thoughts of when it did kind of get announced, I guess everyone at the time, I'd say we're pretty excited about it, because on that first announcement, I guess you didn't really know much more of the information that's come out since. So when you first heard about the announcement, obviously not really knowing the tournament formats and everything, what was your initial thoughts?
This will be interesting, was my original thought. It sounded like they were bringing up a brand new league, and then they announced we're going to do a Challenger Series draft thing. I'm like, this isn't going to work.
I think. For me, I think the vast majority of people probably thought, yeah, this is going to be an interesting concept, but on the initial front, there wasn't much information to go off to decide whether it would necessarily be a good or a bad thing of how they were going to go do it. So then obviously we'll go on to the next part of the news and the release kind of that they put out, which was on the 29th of March, which was essentially them announcing the first 4 teams that were going to participate in the league, as well as by this point the 3 games, so obviously Rocket League, Counter-Strike and Street Fighter had all been announced as the 3 games that would be holding the primary part of the Gfinity Elite Series. Now, on the 29th of March, what Gfinity decided to do was they announced Team Infused, Prophecy, Excel and Reason as the 4 organisations that would essentially be representing the UK. And then the other 4 teams from that could kind of be up for grabs from anyone, whether it be internationally, whether it be a football club, whether it be another UK or general gaming or esports organisation. So on the initial front of that point, I guess that was probably the one that triggered the most amount of people, I guess, out of all of their announcements in terms of the teams that they selected. So, I mean, we'll go through it one by one. I don't think anyone really had a problem with the Infused one. I think by this point, Infused has been around long enough. They've had high-level teams in the vast majority of games. Plus, I guess this is the one thing that how you distinguish like an Infused to, say, like a Fnatic, right? In terms of the Fnatic scenarios and the Dig Science scenarios, they decided to move into the European scenes. They decided to go that kind of way, that venture, and move into it that way. Infused has kind of just stuck to their guns and always tried representing the UK, so I guess you've always got to give them a good amount of credit for that. And yeah, like I said, in terms of the vast majority of games that they have performed in, they've always done very, very well. No problems from me on that one. Guess you're going to be on the same wavelength. Fuck it, we'll go into it now. The Prophecy one.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, I'll let you fire away your thoughts on the Prophecy invite on the firstly.
It's what the fuck. Apologies, but yeah, it is genuinely why the fuck have they been invited? It's they've got experience as a team in one game.
Yeah,
one game franchise basically.
Which isn't a selected game in this Gfinity Elite Series.
Yeah, which also isn't a game. Which basic Call of Duty, nothing to do with Gfinity Elite Series. It's an organization which is run by someone who works for Infused. So obviously, when Infused got approached for Gfinity Elite Series, and then Gfinity go, "Oh, do you have any tips on who should approach for the next UK team?" They go, "Prophecy is a good idea." It's basically obviously you're my best.
They,
You're my good friend. You work for me. Do you want some money out of this Gfinity thing? Yes. So, yeah. So you join Prophecy as part of this. You put Prophecy in part of the Elite Series. What?
face palm.
It makes no sense as part of in terms of competitiveness, because they've been a dead organisation for over a year. They've got barely any pedigree in the UK, and it's gone above a load of other UK orgs like the Endpoints, like the FMs, like M&M. I can list a few, but I can't be bothered. It's just that one's the snub. The rest are fine. That's the snub.
Yeah, I'll completely agree. Like, I think XL obviously have had various teams in various games. Obviously, they have had good teams in COD and Halo. So obviously, that's kind of where the Gfinity ties will probably come into it from maybe why they were selected. But again, I don't really have a problem with XL being in there.
XL have done quite a lot of things in a short time since they're founded.
Yeah, no, they have. I mean,
Like,
obviously, there's been certain a few negative PR incidents, but at the same point, I guess that same thing happens with every single organisation and business. So you can't really. But yeah, I fully agree with you in terms of what they've done in a short space of time. Have to give them full credit for Reason in terms of the prestigious side of what Reason used to be as an organisation, and obviously even now they are still relevant. They have still been going. They have still been fielding UK teams across various games.
They've had a UK Counter Strike team for the past couple of years, more or less on and like always. So
exactly, but yeah, the Prophecy one, like for me, again, I don't want to do this video and kind of just do it as a pure negative and pure hatred towards anything that's come out of it, because we will get onto the positive sides of what we think is going to be good from it as well. But I do think the Prophecy invite does kind of make the tournament lack a bit of competitive integrity at the very least, because from my perspective, if you're going to invite an organisation that essentially hasn't had a UK esports team since late 2013, and then even after that when they came back and had their kind of NA period of a Call of Duty team, that was only for the span of 6 months. So for me to kind of, for them to invite an organisation that's been on and off anyway, and then combine it with the fact that they haven't really done that much in recent times, I do think that there are a lot better choices to kind of invite and take that spot. But at the same point, all I can say at this point is this is where it falls down on Prophecy, and it falls down on their CEO, which is Oliver Sellers, I think, and it falls down on them to then just make the most of it and prove people wrong at this point, right? Like, if he goes and does that and he makes a very good job out of what he can do with Prophecy from this point by partaking in the Elite Series, then at the end of the day, hats off to him, he's done very well. But yeah, the invite in general, I'm yet to come across one person that thought it was a good idea. Let's put it that way. However, we'll kind of roll on. So yeah, they were the teams that have invited. So as it stands, in terms of what teams have what, or what orgs have what teams in certain games. Now, Prophecy, as far as I'm aware, yeah,
Prophecy doesn't announce anything yet.
XL is the only one that has all three done. They've got their Street Fighter, they've got their CS, and they've got Rocket League. Prophecy only have Rocket League.
Yeah, Prophecy only got Rocket League. Infused have
2 out of 3. They don't have CS:GO at the moment, do they? Technically, but everyone, I guess, has kind of got the rumours of what sort of lineup's going to come from it.
It's a NLM lineup that hasn't been announced yet.
Yeah. And then Reason are missing Street Fighter, I think, as it currently stands.
That's correct.
So yeah, because they picked up their Rocket League team and obviously their CS team, so they've got the Hoodlum, Karma, Cray, etc. And in fairness, I think that new Reason lineup will be a bit more competitive than what the old Reason lineup was, because obviously they brought in Thomas and Cinder, I think it was. So yeah, hopefully that will be a more interesting one with that lineup.
You've just played Bommy, but never mind.
No, but I think, don't get me wrong, I love that dude, but at the same point, I think as it currently stands, I probably would put Thomas and Cinder ahead of him. Plus, I don't think he has the time commitments for it anyway at the moment. But yeah, fuck you, Pommy, I'm joking. But yes, obviously we'll kind of go from it from that point of view. So there was once in that announcement on the 29th when they released obviously the 4 organisations that would be taking part. Obviously a Neville Upton quote was like, "This is shaping up to be a hugely exciting tournament that showcases, supports, and invests in the future of UK players and teams." Now, aside from the org invites that came from it, the big sticking point from anyone was how, because obviously as part of the Gfinity Elite Series, amateur gamers can take part in the Gfinity Challenger Series, which was, according to them, a dynamic new online competitive gaming tournament where players and teams can showcase their skills and climb their way to the top of the leaderboards, essentially by earning G points. And then obviously X amount, I think it was like around 90 players maybe in total that they were going to select across all 3 games, so like 30 from each that then become available to be selected via the organizations along that line. So
yeah, that sounds right. Because 2, yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
well, yeah, if each team's going to take 2 players from each game, essentially, right? So, but yeah, from that point, how the Elite Series works is probably one of the big issues that a lot of people are going to have. One of the intriguing bits that got me is in one of the announcements, it was like, if a player is lucky enough to be drafted to a franchise team, we'll be giving the amateur team they play for payment for that player. Now, following that, with another statement, like on another day, Gfinity decided to say, in order to preserve the grassroots structure of the Gfinity Elite Series, players who are contracted to a team as of Monday the 8th of May will be considered ineligible for the Elite Series draft. So the way that I interpret
the way
is,
they phrase that is, I'm not sure if that means players who are currently set up to an Elite Series team,
yeah,
or a team, or a general esports team, full stop.
Yeah,
so that's not clear.
The way that
because how interviews were before, apparently they listed they inferred that teams like Endpoint or FM were amateur teams in the UK when they're 2 of the best sites in the
but I assume they would like. I don't know if that's being chosen, say, like, if a Prophecy, for prime example, decided to try and pick up Endpoint. Like, do they mean it in terms of that side of it, or do they mean if an amateur player goes through the Challenger Series that's contracted to a team, are they going to be paid for it, or is that person just going to kind of... Because if they're now saying the contracts are redundant, or they can't participate if they have that contract, then essentially that player that's playing through the Challenger Series, if it is the Challenger Series, has to end his contract just in order to play it, for the pure rare chance that he might be able to get something from it. And then essentially, if it's Counter-Strike, go sit on a bench. I guess we kind of do need to touch on that as well, in terms of like the games chosen and the effectiveness of how they'll work, because of... As it currently stands, the way the Elite Series is kind of, well, the way the Challenger Series, has been like pictured to us, I think the way it works would be very, very good for Street Fighter and very, very good for Rocket League, essentially. Well, Rocket League, I guess, is still half and half because it's more of a team game. It's at least 3 people. Street Fighter, because of its individually, I can see that working great. But for games like CS predominantly, and the Rocket League one will be interesting, I guess, to see, because I assume it will probably have the same effect as CS. But by having that Elite Series, and obviously the premise is that 2 people, like each organization gets to choose 2 people from this Challenger Series to then represent them as well. So those 2 people will then join the rest of the players that they already have in each respective game, and they will also be salaried by the organization, which is essentially funded by Gfinity at that point. So how beneficial is it actually going to be for these players anyway? Like, from your point of view, are they literally just going to come in? Like, the Street Fighter ones might get a chance. I genuinely believe that, and that'll be an interesting one. I think with Street Fighter, especially because of...
Well, the teams have to pick up 2 players from the Elite Series.
Yeah.
A minimum of 2 players. So, in terms of Street Fighter, that's fine. That's perfect. I'm not sure how many players from Street Fighter are going to be competing, but at least one of them is going to be competing in the actual Elite Series tournament. So I assume for teams like Prophecy, who haven't got one yet, or hell, Reason, who haven't got one yet, and Excel doesn't have a.
No, Excel's got all 3, so
Excel's got
Prophecy
all 3.
doesn't.
Prophecy doesn't have one. Reason doesn't have one, and Infused.
Infused has Street Fighter and Rocket League.
Yeah, so Reason, Prophecy. I was just trying to remember off the head. Bloody hell! Should have looked at a list. Yeah, so the 2 teams that currently don't have one, that's probably going to be fine for those players to get drafted in their teams. But the 2 players who are going to go to the other orgs, who knows? It'll probably work out fine for whoever joins Envious anyway. But
well, yeah. Again, we'll touch on the envious side of it as well. So yeah, but yeah, overall, so the Challenger Series, I do feel like there are benefits to it for single-person games, for team-based games. I find it really, really. Bear in mind, obviously, the whole fundamental of Gfinity is to try and increase the like supposedly from what they've said anyway, is to give amateur gamers a chance to increase the grassroots of what we have within UK esports. So I get what they're trying to do with it. I don't really feel like it's been thought through well enough in terms of how that affects into team games, because I personally think it's very, very redundant to have two players that qualify through CS or Rocket League that then go sit on a bench for the team and not participate in it. Because you've got to think, at this current moment in time, especially for CS, and there's going to be stuff with Rocket League as well, especially for like the Rocket League Championship Series as well, which certain UK players and teams have done very well in. Of how is it going to be beneficial for those? Because of the like a current take the XL lineup, right? For Counter-Strike, if they're going to be doing it, and as it currently stands, they're going to be playing in other tournaments. They're going to have ESEA, they're going to have UK Masters, they're going to have ESL, they're going to have all these other tournaments they're going to be participating in. So they're not going to want to make any changes or give a sub a chance in one of those games anyway, because you know what I mean. They want to be winning these games and playing with someone random. Especially the other thing
because
is
like, the only way the subs thing would work would be if it was an exclusive tournament that any teams taking part would be restricted to take part in those online, in those leagues only. But it's not, so I can't see how it's going to work. Like, genuinely can't see how it's going to work. Because apparently the players can also play in some teams, so they can play, sit on the subs bench for their Elite Series thing, earning that lovely salary, and then go play the different team later on.
So, but that's my point, is how is it going to be beneficial? Like, sure, you're giving that one player a bit of money, but at the same point, is that player even going to be someone that deserves it? I get the point that they've worked their way up through a Challenger Series, but at the same point...
But they could still be shit!
Yeah, that's...
Apparently the highest UK ranked player is like 193 in the Challenger Series, or something, around that stupid number.
But the other thing where I'm going to go with this is that, again, even if it is international, right, like, which it is in terms of the people that can participate in it, even if you're not going to get a UK player that comes through in it, what is it going to do to that person specifically other than giving them money? Because if you can't, if it's someone that's in from say like he's from Spain for prime example, right, like that team, if they've got a UK event up and coming, like I get the point that say like it's separate still, so like there's an I series and there's Gfinity and that person's only going to be contracted for Gfinity stuff. But if there's an event around the corner for that CS team, they're not going to want to start playing with someone different in Gfinity when they've got a LAN coming around in 2 weeks. And they've got to play their own roster. So I really, really don't see how that is going to work. The only time I can see it being relevant is if that sub plays when someone else can't make it for one reason or another. But even then, it's not going to be an ideal scenario, and the other 4 people that are in that team are going to be like, well, congratulations, I now have to play with some completely random dude that I've never heard or spoken to before. So I guess my big point on it, what I would also like, is that there hasn't been much clarification from Gfinity in terms of how that will work, how they think it would work, what is the best way for it to work, and things like that. Because from my, especially like, I mean, as a whole, I guess everyone's probably been quite aggressive on Gfinity as a whole in terms of the way they've done their announcements, and kind of the media side of the way that they've handled it, to me has been, considering the quality of the company and all the things that they've done in other tournaments across the board esports wise, this seems like it's just been a bit of a shit show in the way that it's been announced. I don't mean it in a bad way, again, because I would really, really love this sort of thing to work. But I just fundamentally think, especially bear in mind the tournament was meant to start this month, and it's only been 3 days ago essentially that they essentially announced that that it's being pushed back for this little amount of information to be made public. Like, half the players participating in it don't have a fucking clue what's going on either.
Yeah. So I've heard random things about how the whole entire thing is supposed to work. So apparently salaries only can be given to the drafted players, not the entire team. Which would mean you're going to have 2 people sat on a bench doing fuck all, earning $2,000 a month, because that's apparently what the salary is. Which would make literally no sense. Fuck off the draft idea, and then salary the entire team rather than sit on 2 players, giving them $2,000 a month.
You know what? The only way I could remotely
the highest rank UK player in the Gfinity Elite Challenger Series thing is 201st.
And what's his name?
Dom KE456, someone I've never heard of.
A talented player, that guy.
Obviously.
But the only way that I could see it,
to his profile, so have a look.
Like, do you think that maybe the only way I could see the Challenger Series really being relevant for team-based games is if they were to say, look, 5 of the top players that like were highest up in the rankings then form their own team to take a spot in the series, if that makes sense. That's
Yeah,
the
that would
only
make sense.
that's
That
the
would
only
make
remote
sense.
way I could kind of feasibly understand the way that that Challenger Series works for team-based games, is if they were to do something like that. The way it currently is, and again, by all means, I'm not trying to call out Gfinity or anything like that. I would just really appreciate some fucking clarification. That's literally all it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll go through. So moving on, so obviously there was the Team Envious announcement. So this kind of when I read this, and I read it the next day, and obviously after reading the first announcement and all the kind of social media kind of gossip going around regarding Prophecy, and then the next day to kind of see the title, Team Envious will compete in the Gfinity Elite Series as part of a multi-year commitment. Sorry, what? I'm a bit baffled on that one. So what, like the statement by Hastro, which was, we were very excited to be coming to London for the Gfinity Elite Series and setting up teams for CS:GO, Rocket League, and Street Fighter. We know Gfinity will put on a world-class tournament, and we're attracted to the spirit of the Elite Series and the opportunity to discover new talent in Europe and the UK specifically.
So what that basically means is we're going to look at the UK for Street Fighter and Rocket League, and then bring our French Academy team in.
Right, so you're probably going to know this like off the top of your head slightly better, but in terms of if that was what Envious were going to plan and do and actually send their main team over.
You mean their Academy team?
Well, even their Academy team, but like what other tournaments would essentially like potentially run in conflict with that they should be participating in and not the Elite Series? Or are they just going to say their Academy team, look, this is what you focus on, you're getting money out of it, blah blah blah? Is that literally the way that Envious are going to pose it?
Yeah, from what it was originally scheduled for, which was the 26th of May to the 30th of July 2017, obviously not. They would have missed out on the minor qualifiers, the minor, and then probably the major as well, if it was the main team. Of course, the main team's not taking part, so it'll be the Academy team, and again, that it's not happening yet. So the Academy team is still stuck in France doing whatever they're doing. It's because I genuinely want to know how they're going to fulfill CS:GO for Envious, because it's either they're going to bring a French team in every week, which would be fucking expensive, or they move the French team over
for the space of for the time frame of Gfinity, and then run it that way. Well, I mean, in theory, because of the amount. Well, this is where it works a bit differently, and obviously there's still more like PR stuff that we've got to cover that's been announced. But in terms of the way that the league is essentially kind of being franchised, so to speak, in terms of you look at the 4 teams that they've invited now, from what has been the rumor kind of going on, is the 4 organizations that have been selected, essentially either the vast majority of ownership of said organization, if not all of the ownership of the organization, will essentially go to Gfinity themselves, and then Gfinity will then essentially try and stake a deal to get that organization a lot more investment, whether it be from private investors, whether it be from a football club for prime example, and said owners and staff that are already tied to the organization will then be given a contract for X amount of time to then obviously still represent the company if they so choose, as far as I am aware. Now, I don't know if that is 100% true. There has been, like, from whether it be people that I've spoke to, but
from the interviews that Gfinity have said, the plan has been for a while to say, from the interviews that have, it said they're going to help UK teams get either more sponsorship or different ownership as part of the deals with Gfinity, or they're going to be, or the teams or external teams will pay in $100,000 buy-in fees, franchise fees, which I assume is what Envious have done.
Yeah, I mean that's.
Or it's like slightly less for their multi-year contract, or whatever these other 3 teams will be, whoever they are. They've gone and put $100,000 in because they think it's going to be a great money maker, because Gfinity decided to oversell it with Yuzu figures.
So yeah, I mean that's kind of, I'd say that's my take as well, is in terms of like, do I realistically think Envious did pay $100,000 just to like enter this tournament? To me, that would look a bit sketchy if they did, just because of it's kind of like, realistically, is that going to be worth it for them at this point of view? Personally, I'd say no. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm glad Envious is in it, because of by essentially the kind of stature of who Envious are, then it kind of does make you think the tournament does have good plans and whatnot going forward, because of otherwise, especially someone like Castro that's been there, seen it, done it all sort of thing, then you know what I mean, I don't really think he's going to be taken for a mug in any given scenario. So surely he has enough information there to kind of warrant the decision that they've made to kind of participate in the Elite Series, especially as part of a multi-year commitment. It's not just like a one-season wonder type thing. They're there for the long haul. So that does kind of tell you that there is a lot more behind the scenes that we don't know, which we've already stated multiple times. Again, just the way that they release information is fucking tragic.
That's right, but
I mean, like I said, at the end of the day, if you're at this point where the tournament was meant to be playing this month, and the vast majority of people, even those that are involved in it player-wise, still don't know what the fuck is going on with it, I don't know what else I can say on that. Like, it's to me quite shambolic for these people not to have that information, essentially. I get the point that they want to keep it all kind of closed lip until kind of everything's sorted, but then why start your announcements back in November if that was the case?
Was it November they started?
Well, yeah, their first ever announcement, which they announced like Gfinity Elite Series as a whole, they didn't really put much info to it in terms of the way that it would work, but they did announce the Challenger Series and Elite Series was the 17th of November 2016.
And there was nothing for another few months afterwards.
Yeah, well, I think there might have been, there was the odd announcement in terms of what game was going to be partaken in, but then from that, I don't think there was another announcement until the four organisations, so the XL, Reason, Prophecy, Infused were announced.
I remember now, they announced it in November, then loads of industry events going on afterwards where you get Martin Wyatt and others going, talk to me at this for more information about the Elite Series. And then telling people absolutely fuck all.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's... We'll try and get on some positives, but still. we'll go on to the next part. So obviously, 9th of May, Gfinity Challenger Series Season 1 is extended. So what they said was, in the meantime, to give all players the best chance of qualifying for the Elite 1 Series draft, we are extending the Challenger Series. Cups will continue to run with cash prizes and G points up for grabs, so don't miss out. We'll be sharing start and end dates of the Gfinity Elite draft and Elite Series shortly. Now... To me, the way I'm going to interpret this is that there is 100% underlying reasons as to why it's been extended and why the actual Elite Draft and Elite Series has been delayed. Like, I don't think out of the goodness of their hearts they've just decided, you know what, we're just going to delay the whole fucking tournament for the sake of giving the Challenger players a bit more time to try and rank up. I do not think that is the case in any way, shape or form. I do think, obviously, from following on from that announcement, and this is the part where you probably got a lot more stats and info than I do, but obviously Gfinity announced on the 12th of May that they've raised more than 6 million in oversubscribed placing, which is essentially where the demand for an IPO is high and people have oversubscribed and wanting more shares than they have, so they make more shares available and then obviously make a bit more capital out of it, essentially. So that to me would kind of tie in with that Season 1 being extended, among other things, in terms of they've had a lot of other bits like this going on. They want to make sure that they've got the right amount of capital to make sure the Elite Series does go to plan. That's the kind of good way that I'm going to interpret it, in terms of them thinking that unless they've got all the full resources and everything dedicated to it, that which is rightly done, like there's no point starting it if nothing's ready. At the same point, it does still beg the question of, bear in mind the tournament was meant to start this month, as to why that announcement's been left so late. Well, it was initially, I think it was initially meant to be April, you know, and then it got put to May, and then it got put, but don't hold me on that. But yeah, I think
the draft was supposed to happen last month, and that was supposed to kick off 2 weeks' time. Obviously not.
So the fact that you've still got 3 organisation or team spots available, and you're at this stage,
the pushback is because it's the suits.
Oh yeah, actually that was, I think I've got it quoted somewhere, but yeah, it was apparently the suits are all working hard on sorting out contracts and whatnot behind the scenes now.
Which a certain game employee made quite a fun of, in a tweet about how the UK Masters was starting soon. Shout out to Charlie Tizard.
I like it. But yeah, it's such a weird scenario in terms of, like, for me personally, and this is the one, I mean, I guess I've been quite vocal in terms of, like, me talking about tournament organisers in the UK in general and kind of how much information that they need to make more publicly available and things like that. Now, this whole scenario, don't get me wrong, obviously there's certain bits from the business side of you that you're not going to make public. That's fair enough. But in terms of the how-to process of how a fucking tournament is going to work and all aspects of it, surely that would be a big fundamental. and it's missing so much in terms of the whole way it's good. Like, even with regards to the teams that they've invited, they don't actually need to come out and justify themselves and say this is why we've chosen these orgs, this is why we've done that. They don't need to. But at the same point, bear in mind, the vast majority of the people in the UK scene are fairly sketchy bastards when it comes to new tournaments coming across and how we receive it. Like, we automatically go on the negative from the outset. It's just something that we naturally do for the most part, right? Like, when something like this comes available, everyone's always very quick to jump on the negatives, but they won't say anything about the positives more often than not. So I do think that Gfinity, from their own standpoint, probably needs to kind of look at it. 'Cause I don't feel like at any point through this Elite Series, of the planning for it, they've actually asked people that are currently within the UK scene of what they think would be good.
Apart from the people they've approached to run the orgs.
Yeah, but even then, as far as I'm aware, I don't actually think that they've had much influence in terms of how the whole tournament system and tournament formats and everything like that will work. Right, that's strictly on Gfinity, which
that was decided before anyone was approached.
This is the part where I'm probably like, from this comment, I probably will get a lot of hate, and fuck it, so be it. But there was a who gives a shit anymore, right?
People watch this will hate us for it.
Yeah, but you know, there was that Richard Lewis video a while back, and obviously he was evaluating the UK scene one, right?
The one he said nuked it from space.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, I agreed with the vast majority of what he said on that, but at the same point, there was other certain points where it did seem like he was a bit out of touch of the scene, which is fair enough because he's doing all of his, like, he's doing every other more important work than what the UK scene is, so there's going to be certain things that I guess he's going to be out of touch on, which is fair enough, and I have no problems with that. But to me, that sort of thing does kind of roll downhill, and that's the sort of feeling that I get with this specific Gfinity tournament, is that they're not there on the day-to-day of speaking to people already within the scene and seeing what they think is best for them. They're just going out on it on their own front, thinking, look, because of, and don't get me wrong, again, what Gfinity have done already so far within esports as a whole and the events and everything they've put on, in terms of organisations and whatnot, they're probably like, Gfinity is one of the probably best rated tournaments, what people speak positively about from my experience and what I've seen. So again, this is why it does give me some confidence in terms of the Elite Series actually planning out and going well, is because of the success they have had on previous events. But in terms of the way they're trying to target UK specific, which is great, we do need more stuff like this, and the influx of money potentially to organisations would be great. But it does just seem like they've kind of just gone out on a whim and not really looked at specifics of the UK scene itself. So yeah, I mean, it is a bit hit and miss so far, I guess, from that point. So would you say, like, from the original announcement, would you say it's been like overhyped, the whole Elite Series? I mean, I've read quite a few statements, especially with like the Envious announcement. I guess that kind of picked everyone up a lot more, thinking, oh, if Envious are in it, this is going to be fantastic, right? But like, yeah, I mean, is it going to be attractive to other international orgs as well?
Yeah, it's got a lot of good publicity from Envious, which also led to some confused articles when it thought the UK-based organisations being brought into it, because there was some rumours and speculation of Fnatic or Dignitas.
Yeah, I did see them.
That hasn't happened, obviously. They've gone with Envious instead. Because if it was a UK team that came in, a UK-based organisation, that would be fairly interesting, especially one like Dignitas, who was also in recent history, as in the past couple of years or so, was rumoured to be picking up a UK team, but that fell through when they got bought up by 76ers.
Yeah.
When Envious came in, it was suddenly, oh, this might be actually quite good and interesting, because Astro wouldn't spend all this money and potentially lose it on something that's not going to work. So that's on one aspect, that's comforting, because he is a clever businessman. He would not gotten to where he is by spending money on random shit.
Nice way to sum it up. Yeah,
that's true.
I do.
But the fact is, we don't know enough. The way it's structured, again, it seems to be structured as a franchise sort of system. So, and because there's no exclusivity and stuff like Counter-Strike, in Counter-Strike, and this will probably be the only league structure in the UK for Rocket League and for Street Fighter, and possibly internationally. I'm not too sure. I'm not too familiar with those scenes. It'll probably work for those two, but for Counter-Strike, it'll be a dead rubber and probably potentially lose the the seek a fair amount? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Will be lost on CS.
for other games, I think like the Rocket League scene, there's not much of a specific UK Rocket League scene. Like there are good UK players, probably the same way that you kind of view what Overwatch is now to an extent in terms of there's good UK players, but at the same point there's no real specific scene in the UK. For it, Street Fighter, there are a lot of tournaments that do go on, and there are actually quite a lot of UK Street Fighter players. But how much like public attention they all get is quite minimum. But it would be nice to kind of see a big boost in that, in fairness. But yeah, I do definitely think that it was slightly overhyped, but it does give you a bit more security with Envious being in it. But moving on to like another point, what effect do you think it will have on UK orgs that are not involved in the Elite Series?
Not much.
So even for
not
ones
that much for effects.
Well, I mean, I think on the initial front, like a lot of people were quite scarce in terms of they thought a lot of the players that were playing for teams that weren't invited were then going to try and play within the Challenger Series and work their way up and then go through that way to then try and get a spot on one of the teams invited. But I think the vast majority of current UK players realised that it just wasn't worth it, even for like going in and getting that salary. It's just not worth their time to potentially do it and go sit on a bench, especially if it's
like,
then going to be a team that you've played with
yeah.
before anyway, right? So like they're not necessarily going to want you there in the first place.
I'm looking at the list of players on this like Challenger Series ranking for CS, and the only names I recognise are JP, Muffin, Samuel. They're the only, and Ray One right somewhere a fair bit lower. They're the only names I recognise on the list.
And as much as, like, in fairness, some of them are decent players, but they're not top tier UK players, right, at the moment.
They're not some of the best UK team players, and they're not some of the best UK players.
So
no, but that's honestly, and they're nowhere near the top of this Gfinity Challenger Series listing. The if I go back to the list and look at it from every single country perspective, the top 10 is more or less entire. Well, the top 10 is Polish, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Poland, Germany, Russia, Poland, and Ukraine. It's not even like the close countries to the UK or the traditional UK scene countries.
I just don't see how it's going to be beneficial for them. I just don't.
No, it's because like it's supposed to be a thing which is supposed to help the UK scene, as has been said in loads of interviews and stuff. But they haven't restricted the Challenger Series stuff to just the UK, which was an argument made by some Rocket League players who in other countries where they were complaining that all of their games were going through this Challenger Series this structure, and they weren't sure what's going on because they just want to play games, and they're not sure if they'll be taking part in this, be possibly drafted or not. They just want to play games because it's not structured in a way that separates the UK Challenger Series stuff from the general tournament structure. And instead they just lumped it into one. That's a lot of confusion because they don't know whether or not they're only supposed to pick UK teams. Even some of the owners I've talked to and managers I've talked to have said they don't know whether they're supposed to take up UK teams or any other players at all. It's not made clear.
Yeah, no,
it's a clusterfuck. We've decided to do this quickly and also not tell anyone what's going on, really.
I think I've got various statements as well that like I can understand where they would come from in terms of the lack of clarity between whether it's meant to be like international players, whether it's specifically UK players and things like that. I would imagine that said teams that have been invited have more information and obviously on this, but for players trying to go through the Challenger Series, a lot of people were like, what the fuck is going on? You know what, like one of the big issues I will kind of state that I do have in terms of the effect it could have on UK orgs that are not involved is the fact of, from anyone from the outside perspective that finally comes into the UK scene, right, and they're kind of looking at it upon investments and whatever it necessarily is. Now, the Elite Series, and especially in fairness, the way that Gfinity do market like their events when they are ongoing, not pre-events, as obviously we've decided by this, but the content and everything they are planning to put around the Elite Series in general is very, very good. So that's one thing that I am very excited to. But the effect that it will have is it then going to make people from the outside think, oh, look, well, these are the 4 teams that are in this massive UK league. Are they essentially the 4 best UK organisations that are there? Are they the 4 best Counter-Strike teams that are currently playing? You know what I mean? So from that...
Yep.
But that's the way that I assume people are then going to like perceive it, right?
Because of the Gfinity marketing machine. because they've got quite an effective one. If they
they do. They genuinely do.
What, 2.6 million worth of funding, or was it 6 million?
6 mil. I think it was like 6 mil, and then they're putting like 1.7 to the Elite Series or something along them lines.
Yes. 1.7 for Elite Series and technology. Yeah, put 1.6 million of it into the Elite Series. They're playing. Okay, so they've raised £6 million, which is obviously a test to their marketing machine and the power of esports at the moment, which will be another topic on another day. But they're putting 1.7 million of that 6 million to the Elite Series. They've managed to fund for a tournament. They haven't announced how it's going to fully work, and no one's really sure. They haven't even announced the entire amount of teams yet. They also haven't published how their teams, how the ownership structure of the league is actually supposed to be working yet. Which I've got a feeling it should have been announced by now.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on it in terms of the ownership status and things. Like, to me, that sort of like lack of clarity, and especially when you start hearing it and finding out from the rumours of Gfinity then taking ownership over the organisations, and to me, as much as it might be a very good thing, and I genuinely hope it is, and I doubt these organisations would sign up to it if it wasn't. But because of, again, the lack of clarity, this is what leads to people like us doing shows like this, talking about certain negatives and the shadiness of certain things, is purely just down to the lack of publicity and lack of media work that they've done with it and information that they've provided. If they'd actually been very clear-cut and concise from the outset, it wouldn't even be a problem. But the lack of information is what kind of leads to us doing this sort of thing. But yeah, so the kind of perceptions that it gives of UK orgs, like, I do think that people will then go and see it and they'll look at the reason lineup and be like, oh, well, they must have been one of the best UK teams at the moment. And as it currently stands, they've only just been formed. There's no way you can tell, right? Like, I think Imperial, like, or not Imperial, the ex-Imperial lineup now under XL, like, in fairness, they are a very good roster. So, yeah, I mean, they can be.
They're a very good roster. Again, haven't done much recently.
But yeah, to the two big UK teams you're going to look on the outside of it, of Endpoint and FM, what happens to them in terms of how do people perceive them that are coming from the outside, and also in terms of like Gfinity are obviously going to like send those investments to the way of the organisations that are currently within that Elite Series. So is that then going to make it more difficult for outside teams to get it, and other teams that have warranted it more than, say, a Prophecy? That's the part where I do get a bit irritated by it. But yeah, I mean, you touched on another thing actually in terms of that. There's been no announcement in terms of like how the tournament structures and everything will work either, as far as I'm aware. Yeah. So for CS specifically, and looking at that, I'm kind of like, well, is it going to be? Because if it is going to be like the franchise type format of it, then that kind of confuses me a lot in terms of, you're going to have all these, say, like an 8-team league, and obviously we've discovered by this point that Europeans aren't exactly the biggest fan favourites of franchise X systems because of no relegation, blah blah blah. Makes it, from an entertainment standpoint, doesn't make it nowhere near as good.
Exactly, yeah.
And among a whole,
because in a franchise system, you got no suspense at the end of the season.
Yeah, there is that.
The suspense dies like 4 weeks away from the end of the season because someone's won the championship, which is why a lot of American sports have playoffs to try and sustain the suspense so people don't stop turning up.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like, I think there's so many different aspects of it to go for the time being, and the information to come out, that I think we've got to kind of, I don't want to say bite our tongue on it, but we do essentially have to do that. It's just irritating because a lot of this information should have been put out. But yeah, in terms of the franchise systems as well, like, I think, of course, there are a lot of business benefits to those organisations that are partaking in it and the stability that it does provide for them. However, especially in the way that this thing will be marketed, if they go that way, then I do have a weird feeling that it is going to kind of exclude a lot of the current, and especially if they're kind of labeling orgs like Endpoint and FM as amateur organizations, then if we're just going to like distinguish the difference between, say, like the professional scene and the amateur scene, I do feel like this is going to more so leave the amateur scene a bit further behind than what it currently is, because of the effects that the Elite Series and whatnot will have on it, and the investments going into those organizations that have been taken, especially if it is a franchise system.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm quite intrigued to see how that one's going to work. But at the same point, look, I think if we start kind of trying to go through a bit more of the positives, I guess, either way. But as a whole, to be able to then give, say, like each team and organisation, just if we're just going to focus on teams and players specifically, the opportunity to kind of play in something like this where Gfinity in terms of the media machine that they have and the marketing machine and power that they have, also like the exposure and everything it should in theory bring to those organisations and whatnot should be really, really good. And as a whole, I do feel like I feel like Street Fighter is probably the game that's going to benefit the most out of all of this, because of it being that single-based player-based game.
It's a single player guy, yeah.
I think you've got a lot less hassle with the way that the Street Fighter will work, so that it should, in theory, that should be the big one that comes out on trumps. Rocket League, again, there's some very, very good players. Lack of UK scenario, like scene for Rocket League is kind of an issue, but at the same point, obviously, like I touched on before, UK players have done well in Rocket League internationally and in the RLCS. So by giving more people more exposure, then hopefully it can, especially for like even Rocket League for the AM side of it and the Challenger Series with it. I guess it kind of at least puts those games on more of a pedestal to kind of for more people to take notice and take part and get more interested. But CS and the way that it works,
Rocket League has a quite healthy major tournament system.
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah, it's kind of replicated what League of Legends has done in the way that it works, I guess. But yeah, no, it
has a sort of like league system, at least to the RLCS, which is a $250,000, $150,000 tournament. Yeah.
But to be fair, I mean, I've watched a fair amount of Rocket League as well. It's entertaining as hell to watch. And from that perspective, I do think it's good. But then if you focus on CS, and CS is at the end of the day,
it's going to be the one where most
it's
going to come from. Most viewership figures going to come from. Yeah.
But I mean, between CS and COD, they're probably the two biggest UK esports, right? Like in terms of number wise, and in terms of say like COD obviously has been the more successful out of the two if you're going to equate like UK teams and what they've done. So CS is there as the kind of the biggest. So I don't really feel like it's going to benefit the AM scene that much, if not at all.
You just say the word amateur.
I don't. You know what? It's because I keep seeing it's like on all the quotes that I've got, people keep listing it as like the pro to AM sort of like tournament format because of the Challenger Series. So I keep reading it off that. So yeah, I think that'll be an interesting one. Like I said, I do feel like, and especially from the people that I've spoken to, the plans that they do have for the marketing and content side of it would be really, really fantastic, and the exposure that it can bring would be absolutely exceptional. Because I do think that, especially when content does come out, in order to make sure that the content is a high quality level of content as well. Because I mean, even for whether it be the quality of these videos are probably fucking terrible for the vast majority of people. But at the same point, like. And that's going to be the difference between, say, like a low tier content and a higher tier content. But I do feel like it is going to be very, very interesting. And I genuinely, out of all of this video, just hope for the fact that they come out and they just make things a bit more clearer on the way that everything's going to work. Like I said, I do appreciate the fact of there's certain things that they can't announce yet because of certain things haven't fallen into place, blah, blah, blah. The suits are working on it behind the scenes. It's just from I guess from everyone's standpoint, we would just like a bit more clarity on it, and I'd like to, just general more involvement from people and getting their thoughts on the scene and kind of, when like even normal tournaments, like I love it when they give feedback forms. I love it, that sort of thing, just to try and like, or even questionnaires of how do you think we should do this, how do you think we can do that, to at least kind of make us feel like we've had some form of involvement in the tournament system or the way that it's going to work. So because by that point, if it doesn't work, then we can turn around and be like, look, it's our decision, it's kind of our influence that's made that, and it hasn't worked out, fair enough. But when it's the tournament organizer that decides to do it one way and it doesn't work, then it's like, well, you should have listened to us. You should have maybe like listened to what some of our suggestions have been, all the things that have why it's failed have been things that we've pointed out and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I mean, like I said, we will probably try and do a follow-up. I guess this video, as most of the ones probably in this discussion series, haven't been the most structured, as we kind of go from one point to another, then trickle back to the original one to an extent. But fuck it, it's the whole point of discussion shows. But yeah, I mean, have you got any other specific points that you'd kind of like to mention? I guess one thing that we did mention is that each season would be £100,000 prize pool, supposedly, is what have been. So, but I assume that's split between all three games, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, unless
I
it's a
doubt
bit
it'd be
mental,
I doubt it'd be 100k tournament. So obviously there's going to be the 100k prize pool, so about 30 odd grand per game, and then combine this with each team, each organisation and team will get X amount of budget to then obviously pay their players, whether it be the salary as well as additional costs and whatnot as well. So you do also have to give your due to Gfinity for kind of giving that sort of budgetary allowance, but obviously does that then come into it the fact that they've then gained ownership over these organisations, so they kind of have to. So I guess that'll be an intriguing one to look at it. But yeah, either way, any other kind of venture points that you'd like to mention before we kind of cut it off?
No.
No, it's all
Just-
good.
We just need to know more about what's going on, really.
Yeah,
And whoever these final three teams are, whatever the rumours say, whatever's going on. What's going
it's
on?
just going to be
lads?
like a tier 7 UK org out of nowhere, just gets announced for it. But yeah.
Or it's gonna set up like a London blank or Newcastle X or whatever, just random fucking names of teams.
It'll be interesting. I mean,
variant.
obviously there was the rumour of football clubs moving in and taking those last 3 spots, so that would be an incredibly interesting one if it does happen. That being said, but yes, obviously just to summarise the whole thing, then I guess is that throughout the whole thing, I think everyone is quite eager to find out more information about it because of the lack of kind of clarity that's been provided. I do genuinely feel that a lot more people would be more positive about the whole thing, dependent on that information being more made more available.
Yep.
And overall, obviously, I will still say to people, look, try and support it when it does come out and more information does come out, because if we do need these tournaments. But at the same point, obviously, kind of little shows like this one or little episodes of podcasts, however you want to class it as, is just to try and make everyone else, I guess, kind of aware of the kind of structure and announcements that they've made and kind of how weird it's been to an extent. But yeah, hopefully from the outset, obviously we'll see a lot more information from Gfinity and everything will go swimmingly and UK esports will flourish. One can hope, anyway. But yeah, that has been obviously the end of the episode. By all means, if you've got anything else to suggest for what you would like us to discuss, by all means hit up myself or Duck on Twitter or leave it in the comments. So remember to like, subscribe, and obviously that will be the end of the show. So peace.